that this is a national disgrace. The buck stops with him, and the only decent response is to resign.
You're saying it's if, not when, the Prime Minister should resign?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're in a situation now where I don't think anyone reasonably expects the Prime Minister to lead the party into the next election. But the reality is we have to focus on what the British people care about, and we're being consumed by the psychodrama.
PMQs turned heated as a Labour MP openly attacked Keir Starmer and shocked the House with a strong call for his resignation. The criticism was direct and emotional, showing clear anger over his leadership and recent decisions. It quickly exposed growing tension and division inside the Labour Party.
For the second time in a week, the Prime Minister faces questions over Peter Mandelson from Kemi Badenoch.
When a Labour MP calls for Starmer's resignation at PMQs, it shows something inside the party is starting to crack in public. At Prime Minister's questions, things escalated within just 30 seconds, turning routine debate into open pressure. And when your own MPs start speaking like this, it stops feeling like politics as usual and starts looking like a leadership slipping under real strain.
All of this scandal, all of this drama, which was exactly what Sir Keir Starmer promised a government led by him would not do. They promised a change from the chaos under the Conservatives, and here we are again.
This is the point where, honestly, I think everything starts to feel off. We've all seen heated debates before, but this felt different. Within seconds, the whole tone shifted. It stopped being about defending the government and started feeling like something was breaking from inside the party itself.
They just need to get a grip. I'm completely fed up about it, and I think it's got to the point now where I genuinely think that, you know, as far as the Prime Minister is concerned, it's not a case of if, it's when. And I just think we need to get a handle on this, because people out there are worried about their cost of living, they're worried about their NHS, they're worried about crime on their streets.
And I keep coming back to that line, it's not if, it's when. When I hear that, I don't hear criticism, I hear resignation. I hear someone who already thinks the end is coming. And that's what makes it so uncomfortable, because at the same time, the government is still trying to project control, still acting like everything is steady. But how do we buy that when Parliament has spent 3 straight days stuck on the same scandal?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to be clear, I am completely fed up to the back teeth of this psychodrama in Westminster, the own goals that are coming from the heart of this government. Meanwhile, we've got fantastic Labour councillors, canvassers, activists up and down the country working hard and delivering for their constituencies, like mine in Hartlepool, facing local elections in the shadow.
Then you look at what actually happened in that room. Jonathan Brash didn't just raise concerns, he crossed a line that MPs usually don't cross publicly. And I think that matters more than anything else. Party discipline in the UK is tight. People don't just break ranks like that unless something is seriously wrong. And you could feel it. Reports described Labour benches as glum, and I think that says a lot. That's not confidence. That's not unity. That's people who know things are slipping. What really stands out to me is that this didn't come out of nowhere. This wasn't one bad day. This came after multiple PMQ sessions in the same week, all dominated by the same issue. So by the time this moment happened, the pressure had already been building. And when it finally broke, it broke publicly. Now here's where I think things start to get worse, Starmer's response. He kept saying the same thing. Process was followed. And I get it. That's the safe answer. But to me, it sounded like avoidance. Because people weren't asking about the process anymore. They were asking about judgment. And there's a big difference.
Matthew Doyle didn't become an ambassador, but he was given a peerage in the House of Lords. The Labour whip has been subsequently stripped from him because it turns out that he maintained a friendship with a convicted sex offender after the conviction.
What made it worse, in my opinion, is the lack of any real accountability. Zero direct admissions, no acknowledgement that something might have gone wrong. Instead, we get explanations that feel technical, almost detached. And then the Matthew Doyle situation comes into the picture, a communications chief leaving and then getting a peerage. And suddenly I can see why people start saying this looks like jobs for the boys.
And I think that we have to refocus this government on the priorities of the British people, refocus it on delivering, which fantastic candidates and councillors are doing up and down the country right now in constituencies like Hartlepool, where they're bringing investment, where they're
We need to stay away from the party political broadcast, I'm afraid.
That phrase sticks because it taps into frustration people already have. And once that narrative takes hold, it's hard to shake. Every answer Starmer gives seems to raise more questions than it answers. And I think that's where the real damage happens. Because when people stop trusting the answers, they start assuming the worst.
Can the Prime Minister tell us, did the official security vetting he received mention Mandelson's ongoing relationship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein?
So clear. Prime Minister.
Yes, it did.
And then there's the name that really escalates everything, Peter Mandelson. I won't sugarcoat it, this is where the situation becomes explosive. The connection to Jeffrey Epstein is something people react to instantly. But what really hits is that this wasn't just a past association, it continued after Epstein's conviction. For a lot of people, that crosses a line.
But Kemi Badenoch, I thought one of her punchiest lines was, she said, "I don't know what planet the Prime Minister is on. Appointing someone with known links to the Kremlin was not full due process." And we know that the vetting procedure did flag his connections to companies in China and Russia particularly as being a national security risk.
Then you add another layer. Reports of security concerns tied to links with China and Russia. At that point, I don't think this is just a political scandal anymore. It starts sounding like something bigger. And when Kemi Badenoch frames it as a national security issue, that changes how people see it. It's no longer just about optics, it's about risk. And this is where I think the pressure inside Labour really starts to show. Anas Sarwar calling for resignation back in February 2026, that's not a small moment. That's a signal. Because once someone at that level speaks out, it opens the door for others. Then you hear about an anonymous Welsh Labour MP calling resignation the honourable move. And I'll be honest, that word stuck with me. Because it suggests this isn't just political strategy anymore. It's about doing what they believe is right.
And we're completely consumed by this scandal, and it's completely unacceptable. And as I'm sure you can tell, I'm quite angry about it.
What I find most interesting, and honestly, most telling, is the silence. Publicly, many MPs are holding back, but behind the scenes, there are reports of multiple MPs agreeing privately. And to me, that silence doesn't mean loyalty. It means hesitation. It means people aren't ready to go public yet.
The final point is, yes, Kemi Badenoch called for him to go. I think others called for him to go as well. But the Prime Minister is having none of it. And he says, nothing will distract me from delivering for the country. And then he reeled off a whole load of things that he says the Labour government is doing. But the problem is, this is distracting them. We are all here talking about how long the Prime Minister can last.
And that's how things start to fall apart. Not with one big explosion, but with quiet cracks spreading under the surface. From the outside, it might still look like a united party. But inside, I think it's a different story. When I step back and look at all of this, the public confrontation, the weak responses, the scandal growing, and the internal pressure, I don't see a situation that's stabilizing. I see something that's escalating. And I keep coming back to that same uncomfortable thought. This doesn't feel like a temporary crisis anymore. It feels like something that's heading in one direction. And what really gets me is where that shift is coming from. It's not just opposition voters piling on, it's happening inside Labour's own base too. When your own voters start pulling away, that's when things get uncomfortable fast. To me, this is the moment it stops being media-driven and becomes voter-driven rejection, and that's a completely different level of pressure. You can actually feel how this spills into Parliament, especially during Prime Minister's questions. It's not even about policy anymore. It feels like a full-on clash every time they step in. And then you have Lee Anderson getting ejected on April 19, 2026 for calling Starmer a liar. I mean, that's not normal debate. That's things boiling over. When MPs are getting thrown out, you know the temperature in that room is way beyond controlled.
Look, Keir Starmer is trying to bog this down in process, right? And he keeps saying normal process was followed and he sacked Ollie Robbins. There was nothing normal about Keir Starmer wanting to appoint Peter Mandelson, a man with a track record for lying to prime ministers, with links to companies, with links to the Kremlin, and somebody who we knew, the prime minister knew, had a personal relationship with a convicted paedophile. There was nothing normal about that.
What makes it worse is that this wasn't just one chaotic day. We're talking about 3 straight days where PMQs was completely dominated by the same scandal. No shift, no reset, just constant pressure. And I think once Parliament gets stuck in that loop, it stops being about governing and starts becoming about survival. Then you look at what's happening behind the scenes and it gets even messier. The government has had somewhere between 19 to 36 policy U-turns because of backbench rebellions. That's not a sign of strength. That's a sign that control is slipping. When your own MPs keep forcing changes, it tells me they're not fully on board anymore.
Look, if the government was delivering here, maybe it would have a bit more wriggle room over the scandal of Peter Mandelson, but this is a party, a government that's not delivering. We've had 2 budgets that have made it harder for working people, harder for business, putting up taxes and stalling the economy. That's the reality of a Labour government, and you're absolutely right, Gloria, that's what people are talking about on the doorsteps.
That's when the real question starts creeping in. Not loudly at first, but it's there. How long can he actually last? Because when even senior figures won't confirm if Starmer will still be in position a month from now, that says a lot without saying much. I've also noticed how the language has changed. It's not if he survives anymore, it's how long until he's gone. And to me, that shift is massive. It shows that people aren't debating the outcome anymore. They're debating the timing. Yes, technically the next general election is in 2029, but that almost feels irrelevant right now, because if leadership changes happen before that, everything gets shaken up. We've seen it before. It creates instability, confusion, and even more pressure. When I step back and look at everything, the 64% wanting him out, the chaos in Parliament, the internal frustration, the media storm, I don't see a situation that's stabilizing. I see something unraveling, piece by piece, and what really stands out to me is this. This didn't come from outside pressure alone. It didn't start with the opposition taking him down. It started from within, slowly building. First the scandal, then the dissent, then the polling collapse, and now full-blown chaos. And when both the public and parts of your own party start turning at the same time, I don't think that's something you can easily recover from. At this point, it doesn't feel like power is slowly slipping away. It feels like it's being pushed to the edge, and sooner or later, something has to give.